protecting them? What is it that we're really talking about today?
Let me take a stab at it because I think that's a good perspective because 90% of people think of assets as things that are of monetary value.
Mhm.
Right.
So, for example, an asset is dollars, cold hard cash. If you talk to some people and you ask what their assets are, they'll look at their bank account as a measure
Mhm.
of their value.
Right.
But your assets, quite honestly, and I'll expand on it, it's your health. How
Ooh.
many of us overlook our mental and physical health as
There you
an
go.
asset?
Mhm.
Some of it is our family value.
Yes.
That's an asset
Mhm.
because if you have a powerful and I'll say functional family, that's going to provide you with assets. If you really got it popping in a good type of environment, you may be able to get that loan from a family member versus a bank. And then there's your spirituality. That's an asset because so many of us walk in negativity or are exposed to it. We can take that negativity and that becomes a liability. So remember, the flip side of an asset is a liability. So my point is it cannot just transcend monetary things. It's some of those spiritual and intangible things that make you a better person or add value to your whole being.
That's a great point. What do you have to add? Because I know you got something to add to that.
Coming from the monetary, perspective, it is something that just can generate you cash, and it's not just what we have in our bank account. Sometimes we have to look about what we have in our homes.
Correct.
We don't realize a lot of those things are valuable.
Yes.
Some of the things that's like you said, Darren, like it can be passed down to generation to generation.
Right.
You can have an old picture that's coming from your third generation, your great 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 grandpa.
Mhm.
That's valuable. For me, I have kept my grandfather's old Bible. Those little things that you want to keep and you want to pass down because if you want to be honest, that's what the wealthy do. So why don't
Yes.
we ingrain the same concept as they do?
That's interesting you said that because that goes back to what we were talking about, generational wealth and what gets passed on from generation to generation and how we are kind of losing that as we continue to evolve and businesses are shutting down, family businesses are shutting down because whether it's the family doesn't want to continue or whatever the case may be, but
Times changing.
Times are changing. I mean,
Yes.
things are changing. We're becoming more an age of technology, which I'm saying, and brick and mortar is slowly going away, right? It's
Even the banks,
Even
there's going to be a few less banks. They're changing everything that's going to be converging through, the space where everything is digital.
yeah,
The
digital.
digital space.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, AI. We were
Yeah.
just talking about AI.
Yes.
Artificial intelligence and generative intelligence. Again, there's so much going on in this space, but when we kind of come back to, and this is why it's so important to talk about protecting assets, because it all depends on where you are within your specific situation and what you've built. Outside of the scope of just your family, your personal being, your health, things of that nature, which again will help you with making sure that you're maintaining your assets appropriately. What are some of the things that we think that we miss as far as protecting assets? As we think about aging, and family members aging, and what they're how they're protecting themselves to ensure that they have the right care, the right funds available to take care of themselves. Maybe it's estate planning, maybe it's again all these elements because health has something to do with it, right?
Right.
Because there's an impact on everybody else if we're not prepared. So let's talk about that, and maybe it's an element of estate planning that we kind of get into.
Absolutely. So let me give a perspective on that because again, I love the conversation around financial literacy, and it's just a few jewels I like to share. Most of us, right, wrong, or indifferent, the very large majority of us are very busy at this age. I'm a man of a certain age, still trying to accumulate assets. I mean, that's the capitalistic society that we live in. But most of the time, many of us forget or delay the concept of asset protection. But before we get into protection, let me just break down an element of wealth And wealth, again, it can be very subjective. What's wealthy to one person may not be wealthy to another. So I want to just make sure that I set the context of that. But one of the aspects fundamentally we forget is asset distribution, because I've worked for 34 years and I have X. But at the end of the day, I need to be prepared to understand how that asset distribution is done. So let me just break down those 4 sectors, because with asset distribution, if you have children or people that you're going to give that money on to perpetuate generational wealth, you have to think of trust.
Yes.
When you look at legal protection, you can have a bunch of assets, but do you know there are people, their job every day is to separate you and your assets? So from a legal perspective, you have to understand how power of attorney works, and the ability that you're incapacitated and can't make cogent decisions for your own with the assets that you've acquired. Next is what we call asset allocation. That's, again, when you're gone, or if you're alive, how is that money going to be distributed between the people you want to? You may not have children, but you may have family members. That's what we commonly call wills. And then there's delayed distribution, because when it's all gone, I've never seen an armored car behind a hearse. How do you take those assets and distribute those in an effective way for what you want? So those are just things that I said, as we talk about asset protection, those are the facets that we have to begin to think about and actively plan.
So I think we've all been in some situation where we had an elder parent or a grandparent or family member who is incapacitated, right? Can't make decisions, or they're in a position where they have to be in some type of have medical care, right, around the clock. Or the loved one passed and family members are fighting and arguing around what goes to who and who gets what. And, she never cared about me. She cared about, and then you get into all, and this goes back to that mental health situation, right? It's impacting your mental state, your emotions. Emotions are high. This is why it's important to ensure that things are put in place and very clear as to how things are going to operate. So when those situations occur, you're not in a state of flux. You're not in a state of constant emotion. And then on top of that, you're adding the element of trying to manage through those conversations and those assets to figure out what needs to be done. And that's pre and post mortem, right? So, this is obviously before, when you're trying to care for a family member. And then after they're gone, how that all kind of gets distributed and how that gets managed.
It's crazy you talk about it, because everything that you just mentioned, but in the past 3 years, I have seen family members experience it.
Yeah.
I experienced it, and it's nasty.
It's
really,
nasty.
It really show how bring out people's true colors, because they want to know how much he got, what's given to me, and like you said, it goes back to where you wasn't here,
right?
And just so many emotions are involved, and it's like, okay, can we sit back a little bit and take the emotions out and actually figure out how can we work this? But it never works out that way. It gets really disgusting.
That's why it's important, and I agree with you. And that's why it's important. It's on the responsibility of those who are giving that to the next person, right? So if it's a parent, to not put the burden on the children, to decide that needs to be a conversation had well in advance to ensure that, God forbid anything happens, whether it's a situation where they have to be cared for, or again, after they're gone, how everything kind of gets managed. So I think I agree with you. This is where the nastiness starts coming out, right? Is exactly in those periods of times, because nobody wants to make the correct, or I don't want to say the correct decisions. I think everybody's so full of emotion, they don't really know how to operate in those environments.
Right. So here's where, and I'll just share a personal experience. Here's where the need for financial literacy comes into play. Because first of all, people that don't get into the argument. You're going to find in a family situation, there's going to be a few scenarios. Either people have the means and don't want to contribute, or people don't have the means and they're looking to distribute whatever's left. I mean, pretty much that's how it works. And then you're going to have that third bucket where there's a gap and there's a need to fill that gap. and there are different variations or beliefs of how that should be managed.
Yeah.
Those are the three situations.
Yeah.
Now,
Mhm.
I've seen them in different facets. So my first point would be, you have to be willing to have the uncomfortable conversation, because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, I mean, I make decisions based on data, and if I'm a part of it, right, I have to have the right information, to make the right decision. So my point is, or my recommendation is, if you're in a situation, if it's with an elder, if it's with a family member, and people aren't including you in the decision-making process, you probably don't need to be involved in the aftermath, because at the end of the day, there's a tradition called contributing to one's own contribution for their best benefit. You can't be burdened by situations that you're not a part of. And I also think, if you have experienced a family situation close to you where the aftermath, where people weren't talking, learn from that, because mistakes tend to be copied. Understand that I've seen family members where the matriarch or the patriarch has transitioned and the family's never the same.
Yeah.
That's a cautionary tale. And I can tell you, 10 years ago, my dad, he transitioned, but we kept it together. It was, I mean, that was our guy. And we all had a different perspective in how much we loved him. But at the end of the day, through the grace of God, we put all of that ego aside and were able to do it. None of us had a question about finances, and that's a blessing. So I just want to throw that into the ethos, because I know when I'm not the best version of myself, I may not be the best person, but I made a pact when I went to interact with the rest of my family that, one, I was gonna not be that person. And I just throw that out because we can all learn from that. Let's not be that one, because there is always one. When we deconstruct the bad behaviors, it's not 3 and 4, there's always one. And you have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
I kind of want to piggyback off you, Darren, and I also want to ask you guys a question as a marriage couple. So there was a scenario in my family where, the two couple, they was having a discussion about, life after, and the guy made a decision and he didn't include his wife.
Ooh.
So once stuff hit the fan, things were not in their proper place. And you said something to the point, Darren, about tough decisions, like, when you feel you and your significant other is not on the same page about your finances or about how your afterlife should be, how can you come to a point where y'all can agree? How can that work? Because I know there's a lot of people that's in that situation.
Oh yeah, I mean,
that's a bad situation. To
yes,
with.
yes.
Here's a perspective, and without getting into the weeds about it, I mean, our financial model, I think, works because we don't argue about money. Now, we got married later in life,
right.
So
right.
we were established in different ways. Now, my parents, they were in North Carolina and had to share a hot dog with each other. So their journey was very different, but I learned from theirs.
Right.
My dad was the guy for 40 years would meet my mom and give her his paycheck because she was the more, I'll say, financially savvy with respect to taking care. Now, I would never do that just based on my knowledge and how I'll say my level of independence. But my point is, I do have a perspective, and it's different because we don't have children. Now, if we had children, it would be a whole different thing.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I know that, God forbid, if something happens, she would not want. But then at the end of the day, I also, just based on a spiritual level, I want to give someone a chance to go to school at an HBCU and get that benefit.
Right.
So that's the only thing that I've discussed that with her. I was like, I might bequeath 50, 100,000, whatever the number is, to somebody so they can have that, because I know the power of that.
I think that's dope.
But other than that,
but that's a given. That's who we are as individuals. As far as it's not just about us, right? Thank God I have the means to take care of myself, because when we get into situations like this, you have to also be sure you can take care of yourself on your own. God forbid anything happens.
Right.
you can't always rely on somebody else. But at the same token, we know when we leave this earth, because we don't have children, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I have nieces and nephews. He has a niece and nephew, but at the end of the day, we have to make decisions that are, number one, we make sure we're taking care of one another,
Right.
but also give to those who are in need or need an opportunity in life, to make sure that they're, you know, we give that as well as a donation,
And-
right? So, and I agree with him. I mean, I have no problem with that, because at the end of the day, that's a discussion to have. That's his wishes, then that's he's gonna get his wishes.
And here's the other thing, and I hope at some point Rudd can come off, and this is where the conversation, and I think I mentioned it earlier, the uncomfortable conversation.
Mhm.
Right.
This is where that asset distribution conversation has to come, and it has to be in a room with a certified financial analyst or planner that can give you the best advice that suits you. So if you need coverage, right? I'm a man of a certain age right now. I still think, you know, I'm indispensable, but that would be a lie. And I would be reckless if I continued to think that way. So we have to have those discussions with people together as a married couple to say, hey, in the event that this happened, how does this plan affect us?
Mhm.
If a tree hits the house
Right.
and hits me on the head and I'm no longer there,
Right.
yes, you may have X, which I may think is enough, but it might make sense to get a professional to vouch for that.
Right.
Is that
Exactly.
enough?
Right.
It costs about $15,000 to put somebody in the ground today. Well, is that all? Is this it? What if you have a long-term situation where you're indispensable? How much will that last? Does it make sense to carry this or that? Is term life versus whole life insurance the
Right.
best alternative for you? So those are the
Absolutely.
healthy discussions that married couples
Mhm.
have to do. But then there's an added element that many of us in this space are going to get caught into, and it's elder care. It could be
Big.
not just a parent, but a
Mhm.
grandparent
Yep.
or an aunt or someone
Yes.
close to you that you feel needs to have that
Mhm.
type of
Mhm.
care.
Right.
And that's actually a situation that I'm going through right now with my parents. Is my grandmother. You know, she's now living with my parents. My parents are older now. They're, you know, they're not of the best health.
Right.
You know, and caring for someone 24/7 who has
Oh, right.
dementia and Alzheimer, and can't really, is heavy and can't be lifted and cared for, you know, in a way that they need to. Those are conversation. You have a whole plethora of family members
Right.
that should be engaging and making sure that they're doing their part in the whole scenario,
And
you know.
sometimes that's not always the case.
And that's not always the case, right?
Ooh.
And you know, I won't get into specifics, but at the end of the day, I look at my parents and say, oh my God, you know, I have to worry about, I love my grandmother, don't get me wrong. However, I also know my parents are of a certain age who they themselves have to worry about themselves as well, because I don't want to lose my parents over them stressing and not getting 100% the support required to take care of an elder like that.
Absolutely.
You know, so that goes back to, how do you manage that? You know, because that also now comes down to me, you know, and my sisters. We have to worry about that. So,
have
you
to
know, again,
plan.
people don't realize there's a trickle effect that infects everybody. So if
Exactly.
there's not a plan and everybody is not aligned on the same page, that's going to cause strife and aggravation and things of that nature. So with that said, I know we have Rudd on the line. Rudd.
Yes, how are you guys?
He's saying something, but ain't nothing coming through.
I can
Oh,
hear
no,
you.
I think he has to unmute, but let me just expand
Yeah.
to this point. The other thing that's going to exacerbate this over time is people are living longer.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
here's the thing, while we may think, oh, the average life expectancy is X. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was only 61. Well, my mother's 85. God bless her soul.
Mhm.
And right now seems to still be in decent health at that age.
That's
so
awesome.
at some point, and that's a blessing.
Yeah.
It is.
And at some point, you know, when we talk about seeing the longer game, you know, if I know that Stefania's parents are aging, my parent is aging, we have to figure that out. I have to be able to be nimble and understand my mother's situation. But guess what? I also have to understand her position and her parent situation, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be one,
Unit.
Right.
but I've got to have that univision because we have retirement plans. And I've just said, hey, you know what? Hold on. Let's see how it works, because she can't have the same solution for her, and I have my
Mhm.
own solution
Mhm.
with her, and we don't factor that in
Mhm.
because I have different scenarios that go through my head because you never know what can
Yeah, you
happen.
never
But
know what to
Absolutely.
expect. Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard situation, but again, it goes back to planning. And that's
Mhm.
why I think this show is rather important because we don't sometimes protect our assets because we're living for today most times. We're not thinking about down the road in the future what could potentially happen, right? We're always assuming it's always going to be the next person that
Mhm.
has to deal with it, not me. But yet life continues to pass us by, and then we're in a situation where we're trying to figure it all out, plus the emotions are coming in into the middle of the whole situation. And that's where again we have to be very clear and we have to be prepared for any scenario that could come across. That is number one, living or in death. Living is so important because again, you have to worry about how do you take care of someone who's ill? How do you manage that? What are those conversations? What are those decisions that have to be made? And make sure that you're making the appropriate decision and there's engagement by the family members.
Mhm.
And if honestly people don't want to be engaged in that conversation, then they have no say into what gets done.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you're not going to be a part of the solution, you're a part of the problem. So stay out of it.
Right. And this was this from my perspective, because I know everyone's not like this, but this worked so beautiful. When my grandmother got sick, my mother was her primary caretaker, but she still had her children, the grandchildren,
Yeah.
and then my aunt, all of us rotating
Yeah.
to help take care of my mother. And then she even had the home health service. And this to back up a little bit, before the home health service even started, I remember one day I took my grandma to a doctor's appointment and I was just telling the doctor about her condition. And then she decided to educate me. Hey, did you know you can have services? Do you know you can have home up
Yeah.
there? So I kind of want to expand on this because Darren, you kind of hit on the head with the planning. There's so many financial gurus out there, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
so many people that's saying this and that's saying that. And then you might say, hey, I saw so-and-so talk about this, but I kind of want to put this into people's head. You have to think about what your need is,
Yeah.
right? And is that person particular talking to what you need? Are they an expert in that particular area? Because if they're not, you need to continue to do your research to see who's the expert in that area. Because like I said, there's so many gurus out there.
Yeah.
You don't know who they're talking to. And that's the key thing too. That everybody has different target audience. So they're
Correct.
telling you that piece of information because you are their target audience. You are the person that's making under 50 G's. You are the person that's not homeowner. So they're talking to you in a specific language. And again, I come from this space because I'm in the financial service arena. So this is why I'm trying to give that light and peace to you to let you know, just be careful who you take advice from.
Yeah.
Do your homework and find the expert that's in that area.
Kalima, you hit
Agreed.
the nail on the head
Agreed.
because I was going to preface before we jumped in it. Number one, the first recommendation I should have started with is, again, always in your current situation, talk to an accredited, licensed CFP. And number two, what Kalima said, and I'll even try to make it clearer than she made it in a crystal clear way. Everybody's situation is different.
Yeah.
Right.
Because again, I may feel as though I don't need insurance. I may not, but understand that insurance for people that are just starting out is one of the best ways to mitigate risk. So many people have this impression that only physicians or small business investment don't need protection from their assets, but we live in a litigious society.
Yes, we
People
do.
are looking for accidents to happen.
Mhm.
One time a man slipped on my property once and wanted to sue me. Now, the only thing that made that not work was because the people hadn't come to remove the snow. So he was looking for change. And when I talked to a lawyer, they said, well, let's see the pictures.
Right.
So when we had the pictures, he goes, well, the snow wasn't removed. Why didn't he walk around? See what I'm saying?
And I'm gonna say something from the financial service aspect, because I know a little bit about homeowner insurance. So when people have certain accidents and people are like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna pay for it? What's in your pocket? Do you have home insurance? Do you have car insurance? Because we have to know what's in. A lot of people don't even read their declarations. They don't even know what's in there. So sometimes I come from that space. I be like, well, you don't have to worry about you technically getting sued. And this is why also too, business owners get business and county insurance, because if something happens in their property, then that goes back to the business insurance. So people have to know, like you said, what's in your pocket, what you have.
Right.
Because guess what? That $23 that you spend every month on your whatever you like, you can take that same $20 and purchase that insurance, and that will cover you. And you just, because you never know.
Exactly.
That's protecting your assets, right?
But that's reallocating
that.
Exactly. Here's a lot of things people don't realize. They can reallocate their funds.
Yeah.
Because you got to ask yourself, is Netflix worth $20 a month? And Hulu and Paramount. You know what I'm trying to say? You might have to get one of those so you can protect yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And to that point, that's there's a specific type of coverage called umbrella coverage.
Yes.
That takes all of that into one, because it can become overwhelming. You know, I was looking at the different aspects of asset protection. You know, when you think about it, you have insurance planning, you've got investment planning, you've got estate and wealth planning, you've got retirement and income planning, you've got tax optimization, you've got college funding if you've got kids. All of this is a lot, and we have to have the conversation, which is why we thought this was a main topic, because it's more than just making money. A lot of people, all of us, are trying to make money. But at some point, again, there's going to be that point in time where when you stop, whether you do it voluntarily or you can't, you've got to figure out how to move on with what you've got. Yeah. So take these jewels and nuggets, because at some point, you know, you're going to get a cough or an ache or a movement that will minimize your ability to be your true 100% self. So all of these moves, if it's incremental insurance, if it's for childless couples like Stefania and I, finding someone that you feel comfortable with that can help you when you're not ready.
Right.
Having those discussions with loved ones and siblings as you see mom and daddy get older and slower, making sure you have the conversation. And just from practical experience, when you begin to have those discussions and people start saying, I don't want to talk about it, or they're not ready, you better get ready, because you will have to do more than is required for that to be a smooth transition.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to your point, and we have to make this clear. You guys have to have these discussions, because, again, we don't know. We didn't know when COVID hit what was going to happen. Right. And so many people lost their lives and had to bury loved ones, or they have what they call long COVID, and they're, you know, still sick or whatever, or dealing with cancer and couldn't get medications or whatever have you.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen. You have to prepare as early as possible. You have to have those candid conversations with your family members, your loved ones, so that you can prepare, getting a living will, making sure that you have enough insurance to cover yourself. God forbid anything happens. What is going to be the care that you're going to need? What is going to be, I mean, these are all elements of making sure that you're protecting you're protecting yourself, and you're protecting the people who are going to have to make those decisions on you.
Absolutely. Power of attorneys.
Yeah.
Power of attorney. There's another one,
and know
right?
the difference between power of attorney and durable power of attorney. And you should be speaking with a financial expert on that.
Yeah.
Correct.
To know the difference between the two.
Health proxies.
Yes.
Okay. Health proxies. You learn this sometimes just from the people who are experiencing it,
and
right?
You experience it.
Exactly. And you experience it. Health proxy, making decisions on your health when you could no longer make those decisions for yourself.
Absolutely.
You have to have who's that person, right? And you have to have exactly what type of care you need. You know, you need to be worried about. So these are things that are just in the living.
Yeah.
Just in the living.
Here's one thing I want to add on too, right? Because we said, what are assets? Your children are assets.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So God forbid if you had a children that's under the age of 18, you got to ask yourself, if something happened to me, who's going to take care of my kids?
Right.
Because that's important.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, let me share a quick story. Most people know Bob Marley, right? Great reggae guy. He had a bunch of kids.
Yes.
Had a lot of kids. And when he passed away, it was obviously unexpected, but he didn't have a will, right? And unfortunately, because he had this body of work that everybody's renowned, for years, his assets and the fruits of his creative content were in limbo. And it took an individual that started Island Records to pretty much fix it for him. But the point is, for years, that family suffered, financially, because they couldn't untangle the mess of probate. And that's the story that makes sense, because this was millions of dollars. But again, for families, some of us have parents that have had, I'll say, different lifestyles than the rest, other children outside marriages and etc. You have to be very sure that when, these things happen, that you have a fundamental grasp of how probate works.
Yes.
Because if you have people that are out there, looking to, let's just say, get their fair share, for lack of a better term, even if it's justified or not, typically when things go into probate, assets are frozen.
Yes.
And that until things are sorted out.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the biggest beneficiaries tend to be the state and the attorneys.
Yep.
And talk about probate. Here's the thing: people don't realize you gotta have money to probate sometimes that will, and that costs.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. So again, and I'm speaking from a personal experience. It's better to have those conversations and get to an attorney to understand your options. They'll be in a better position to give you the scenario based on your situation than I. But I've seen where people have said, okay, I think right now I better really talk to the individuals involved while they're of sound mind and get a perspective, because even if you put it on paper, that's the other thing about a will. You can change it every day if that's what
whatever is going to be is going to be your last written will.
You can cut. Well, there are a few things you can cut through the minutia and use services like LegalZoom.com. However, it's best to have I'll say a more formalized version of it, because the whole key component is being of sound mind. Because typically that's where challenges to wills come from, particularly when people are aged or if they're ill. Because during that time when someone, let's just say, is marked with any type of mental capacity issues, that's where it can be challenged in court. But very, very simple. I mean, you can on a piece of paper say, I, Darren J of sound mind and soul, bequeath XYZ, get a witness and get it notarized, and that will stand in court.
Didn't a celebrity do that thing?
Yeah, you can hear me?
The Franklin thing?
Yeah,
she
they
wrote
found
something,
it under a
right? She wrote it down, and the son had to go through hoops.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
That's a perfect scenario.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes we're, what do we call, penny poor, pound foolish, because sometimes we, and I think about this just in ordinary, cases like car insurance, health insurance, insurance on your homes and your assets and whatever have you. Sometimes we look at it from, okay, you know what? I for instance, car insurance, and this is just a prime example. After a certain period of time, when your car is fully paid for, what do most people do? They drop their insurance down at a lower cost because, I'm just going to get liability. There are so many other scenarios that can happen that you're not protected, that now you're in court, you're paying out, all type of stuff. You could potentially be physically hurt. The other person could be they could be coming against you, coming after your assets, your homes, your, whatever. Again, guys, you have to be, I think there's two components here. Number one, speaking to a financial advisor. Secondly, is making sure that you're also getting with a lawyer or someone who has the expertise to be able to understand all the things that you have as far as assets within your environment, and how you manage all these aspects that are definitely required or needed. I don't say required. I say required because I think it's important. That's why I say required. However, you need to understand your scenario, your situation, and where your risk could potentially be, so that you can mitigate that as best as possible.
Right. And it's funny, just to put things in perspective, when you buy an iPhone, right, you spend, or one of these Androids, you're spending over $1,000. What's the first thing they bake into it?
Insurance.
Yet some people aren't walking around with life insurance. You know what I'm saying? Now, again, and this is for the younger audience. The younger you are, the better you are at doing that and helping yourself, and potentially, depending on the type of insurance that you have, leveraging that for some of your aspirations. And again, that's why I hope that Rudd could help us with that, because he has a level of expertise. But term insurance is a good thing to have if you're young and coming out. Whole is just as good if you get the right type of vehicle.
Right. And it depends how you use it. And that's what I teach people too. You can have both, and you can put it in different perspective how you want it to be utilized.
Correct.
But people don't know that.
Correct.
So what are some of, do we know, like, what are some of the things? Because I think, again, people get confused with term and whole. Oh, and that is Rudd right there. Hold on one second. Let's get him on the line. Rudd, welcome.
Hey guys,
how are you?
I've been struggling with my audio.
I'm glad you called in, because I think this is your area of expertise, sir.
If not, I was going to jump in, Rudd, but this is perfect timing.
I've been trying to jump in for the last 15 minutes already. This thing is giving me a problem, but I'm not at home, so I'm on the road, just having a little technical difficulties, as you say.
That's all right.
But I do want to say something that you guys are covering everything from soup to nuts, but I want to just go back to the insurance part.
Sure.
If I may, real quick.
Absolutely.
And I think one thing we have to realize about insurance is also looked upon as income protection.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if I have two small kids and I'm bringing in, let's say, $2,000 a month into the household, then what happens if I'm not around? Then that means our family will have to move or stuff like that. So, you could set up something where you could say, hey, God forbid something happened to me. This is how much I got over here. Just, send my wife $2,000 a month, for the next 10 years. By then the kids should be grown and on their own or whatever it is. But it has to protect you in the now also. It's not just for later, because we never really know what happens. It's only two things that happen. You either live too long or you die too soon.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't know our expiration date. But y'all guys, pretty much covered the most of it. But I think it's important to realize too that it definitely should be something considered for like income protection and in the now. In the now too. That's something that's in the now, and it also could help someone who maybe not be a homeowner or something like that. They don't have too many assets already. That could create an immediate estate for them just by having, a life insurance policy. Now, my strategy, I would recommend always term, because it's a lot cheaper. I mean, you young and you in good health, you're gonna get $250,000 for probably $50 a month or less. But of course, when you wait till you're like my age, that same type of policy would probably cost, $300-$400 because of my age and other things. The thing is to get it as early as possible while you're healthy as possible, and you lock it in for that same price for 35 years or whatever. The laws change from state to state. And where I'm at, you could go 35 years. In some states, it might be 30, or it might be more in some states.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what Kalima said too. Like there's so many variations of the insurance, and so many what they call riders that you could add on, and you could tailor it to what your needs are.
Mm-hmm.
They have something like just an example. They have like a terminal illness rider.
Mm-hmm.
Say that you get diagnosed you terminally ill. They'll let you access 80% of your death benefit while you're alive, and so you can enjoy your last 6 months and set up everything you need to set up before you leave the earth. So it's all kind of stuff that you could do, but you definitely need a professional to explain all this stuff and just go over it and just tailor it to you, and just you gotta just look at it from a case-by-case basis. I'm sure all 4 of us or 5 of us in the room right now, all of our situation is different, and what works for one probably would have to be tweaked a little for the other one. But I just wanted to add that on to what you guys already said. And I appreciate you guys letting me join the show today. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Rud. I mean, you gave a good perspective. Now, I like what you said about the different scenarios, because
I know, I was just thinking that too. Yeah.
I've looked at a scenario, and I haven't given it a lot. Like, I was looking at what's it called? It was a variety of insurance for, I'll say, what's it called? Full long-term disability. It's expensive.
Yeah.
You know, but I have to do the math around it, because if I look at what I'm trying to leave, does it make sense for me now to stop while I'm still earning and put that stake in the ground? Now, I've done some cursory analysis of it, and some of these particular plans, while they're a little bit on the pricey side, they can also be tailored into investment vehicles. So that may be something that I may have to, make a decision, but they are very costly. So I may have to look at my own, I'll say, mortality and my health and make an informed decision, which was the other part I wanted to mention. If you are relatively a person like myself that doesn't smoke or doesn't drink, doesn't have blood pressure, doesn't have high cholesterol, term might be a better option from a cost perspective, because I can get more for a longer period of time without paying. And I'm talking about the first vehicle I was talking about could be between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. I mean, that's a big investment.
That's a good point that you bring up right there. What I'm teaching the people who I'm dealing with, I'm teaching to, like, I don't think insurance need to be something you have for the rest of your life.
Correct.
You know, if I decide I want to leave $1 million policy to my daughter, hey, the minute I get $1 million in my 401k or my bank account or whatever it is, I'm canceling that insurance policy.
Right, exactly.
And that's according to everyone's situation.
Exactly.
Right.
You get the term insurance while it's cheap. You can get the most bang for your buck out of term, but you still spend the money. You just invest the rest, and that's why it's like a, it's a lot of moving parts in there. So you're saving the money there, but the money you save, that's the money you invest. So you still spend it. You just invest the rest. You buy the term, which is cheap. Don't buy the whole life, because the whole life is just like a savings mechanism built into your insurance policy. I don't recommend that, because if you have to borrow from it, they charge you interest on your own money.
They do.
And stuff like that. So I would say,
depends on the audience.
just learn how to invest the rest. And I'm not saying at a bank where you're getting 1% or less. I'm saying learn how to invest it where the bank invests, where they getting 8-12% on the money.
Yep.
That's going to get you where you need to go a lot faster. Once you get to where you need to go, you don't need insurance no more. That's just another bill you can eliminate down the road. So it depends on what your mark is. If you're just looking for something to cover your burial expenses, and that might be to the tune of $15,000, $20,000 or whatever it is, you get your $25,000 policy. The minute you're able to save $25,000, cancel the policy.
That's what I told
I'd be like, hey, if something happened to me,
hey, I said,
and that's a bill I don't have to keep paying. I don't want to pay insurance the rest of my life. I want to get to my financial independent number, and then I don't need insurance anymore. But
I
you
like
have to
that.
figure out what your FIN number is.
That is
Once you realize what your FIN number is, you need a professional sometime to help you figure that out.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So once you figure that out, you go for that. And once you hit that number, you can lighten the load on insurance. It's like having a car, like we said. Like, am I going to really keep colliding on a 10-year-old car that the value is not even worth nothing? I'm not going to fix it if I crash it. So it's like, even the company, they're going to be like, just toll it out. It ain't worth fixing. It's the same thing. Once you get to that number, cancel your insurance. That's just my suggestion. I'm sure there's a lot of other concepts and advices. I'm just saying that's my strategy, and that's how I was taught.
Love it.
And that's redistributing your assets, right? You're again, so you're taking that money and now you have it invested to the point where now you can cancel that cost per se, but you already have the funds and you've invested it. So I agree with you, Rud, because I think a lot of people, they don't realize, and you made a very good point, because not everybody has a home, right? You've got people living in apartments. How do they're not thinking about that because they're like thinking, I don't have an asset. But you know what? You got to have insurance.
Absolutely.
You got to make sure you're covered. So, Red, you made some good points there because it really does impact more than just people who have homes or, to your point, if you're living in an apartment and you don't have a home, but yet you have children, how do you make sure they're going to be taken care of?
Right.
Or they have to take care of you. So I mean, some really great points there. And I actually like your perspective as far as, you get the term, it's at a cheaper cost. You do it early on where you're not sick and, all these other ailments coming into the picture. And then when you kind of get that money and you, whatever, if it's a 401k or other situation, you cancel the policy. And again, to your point, everybody's situation is different and how they manage it, which is fine. Talk to somebody to make sure you understand all your options.
Absolutely.
So that you make the right informed decision.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go for the first thing that you hear. Make sure people understand your scenario, your situation, where you want to go, what you're trying to do to make sure you're making the right decision for yourself.
Absolutely.
And the last thing, and I know Red's still on the line, I'm just going to challenge all of the listeners to do, because we are our own worst enemies when it comes to self-care. And when I say that, look, I'm not a nutritional nut or anything, but I do know this: eating right, living right, having a healthy attitude add years to your life. Stress kills, bad habits kill, sedentary lifestyles take years off your life. So you have to be that owner of it. What we can't control, we can't worry about. And that's an easier said than done, but I can share and bear witness that it's a science. It takes not just one day, but many a days to actively integrate that into your program, because sometimes there is a such thing of dying from a broken heart, or working yourself to death, or worrying yourself to death.
Yes.
And if we don't look at that through a spiritual lens, we're going to shorten our own lives on this planet.
Wow.
Stress kills.
That's a big insurance policy right there.
That's the term. Everything you just said, Darren. Stress kills. That's all that is. Stress.
Stress does kill. The stress does kill. Raises your blood pressure. It, again, the happier you are, the longer longevity in your life. The more miserable you are, the lesser your life expectancy is.
Right.
And that it leads to other ailments.
Yeah.
That really leads to other ailments. So you have to be careful with that.
I listen to, I do a lot of reading, obviously, but they talk to these people that live these long lives. I mean, my mom is 85. I talk to her, she's not just my mom anymore, because I know at some point, and God willing, that happens down the line where I may have to make decisions for her like she made for me when I was not capable of making them. But I ask her, I do. Those are among the first things I say. How are you feeling?
Right.
What are you thinking?
Right.
I looked at her and see how she's eating. I know she had some health issues before, but that's what we have to do. We also have to be each other's brother's keeper and not be afraid to have that conversation, because a lot of times, like I said, we get caught up, or sometimes we feel we can't change. And while this is outside of the money thing, a lot of it is a mental thing, because a lot of our conditions are not just because things happen. It's our mental condition, in my opinion, that we've not really looked at and focused on. I've had to change bad behaviors of mine in the past, and I own up to them. And by doing that, I found over time, by making those changes, I've been a happier and, dare I say, even productive person. So if I can do it, people out there can do it, but it takes a lot of time, and it takes, I'll just say, for lack of a better term, some self-inventory and some work, and you can make it happen.
I want to share a story real quick about myself. I was having eye issues. My vision was really bothering me, and it was to the point where I had to shut off all the lights in the room, and I realized it kept occurring. So I said, let me go see my doctor. She did a thorough eye exam on me. She said, Kalima, there's nothing wrong with your eyes. I said, yes, there is, because I keep having this issue. So one day I was by myself and I was doing something. I had a situation came up, and real quick, I acknowledged that the stress, that my eye problem that I was having, it was stress. It was stress going to my eye.
Wow.
And I didn't even realize it until that
Mhm.
moment. I was working on something and something that threw me off. It was a stressful situation, and the pain was going to my eyes. So I'm saying is sometimes we don't realize some of the things that we feel and we're going through. That is stress. But you have to be in awareness of your body and figure out, well, what's going on with me. And it only took me 2 months to figure it out. Sometimes it takes people a lifetime just to figure it. And it took me 2 months. So I'm saying is, the more you pay attention to yourself, the more you can get down to the barrier of what's the bigger issue.
Yeah.
That's protecting your assets, guys.
There you
right.
go.
That's right. Protecting your assets. So I'm pointing for everybody on the radio to my brain, because one of your biggest assets of yourself, but going back to what everybody has said, your health, mental health being the prime asset that you have, because that right there controls everything else within your body.
Yeah.
So you have to protect that, and you have to be aware, self-aware. You have to understand what's going on in your life and the people around you, the people you interact with, how you operate in those environments, because again, they can either make you or break you, you know.
And one more thing, I just have to add it since we went there, and I'm looking at people in the room because I know their hustle. Rest.
Yes.
That's the other
Rest
thing.
is key.
We are a sleep deprived society. We are going after it in unprecedented levels, but we have to rest. And I am as equally bad at that.
Yeah.
You have to rest. The
Yeah.
body has to rejuvenate and fix itself. This is simple math. You are a cellular being. And in order for those cells to rejuvenate and refresh so that you can be your best self, you have to rest. I mean, when I was young, I never slept, but we have to sleep, because if we don't, our bodies will tell us. And those are the aches and the pains and the headaches and the irritability and the lack of focus that make us diminish our performance. So take it for what it's worth. Some people need 7 hours, some people need 6, some people need 9, but that 3 and 4 sustained is a liability. Don't let anybody. Rest is key.
Absolutely.
Hey, Darren, I always agree with Darren. I don't know why. Me and Darren, we got a lot in common. I think this is my closing remark, because you said something that was so powerful, that especially regarding your mom and stuff like that. To me, that's one of the biggest problems that we have, especially with the youth. Like, if you have access to an elder or somebody in your family that you can trust or something, you got to utilize that. I mean, the best thing my father did for me was say, hey, I need you to drive me to North Carolina. I got to take care of some business down there. So, of course, the youth in my family, like, oh, I ain't driving down there 10-hour ride. We fly down there. We meet you there. But you missing the lesson on that car ride.
Right.
You have a chance to ride 8 hours straight with an elder, somebody that's set up estates and has property and all this stuff. You wouldn't want to get in the room. I wish I could ride the car with Darren to Florida.
You can.
We'll be able to took over the world. Don't Terry in there. Like, we gotta stop getting all our information off the internet and Google everything. You got access to real people that did what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
Respect the elders. Get in that car, take that ride, and you said you read books. That's another key thing that's missing. The books have been removed. Kids don't even know how to use a library card or how to search in a library for stuff in some cases. I'm not saying everybody, but the library ain't what it used to be, man. That's not being utilized. It's too convenient just to get on that phone and just Google it. And that's what they're going to do. But that the real conversation, even up to date, is going to happen when the mics turn off. We're not going to say everything on the air. When I met Darren, me and Darren was in the DJ room having a whole conversation, and it was a whole show going on the other side of that plexiglass.
Yep.
But we really did the show there. And the last time we left the station, we stood outside in the rain for like another 30 minutes, and we had a real conversation outside. That was a whole other show we did out there. So when you're in the room with people, you have access to people like Darren, like Stefani, like Terry, like me. If you got your mom, I got my pops, or whoever it is. I mean, take advantage of that. That is really one of the most valuable information you're gonna get from these people. These people lived 80 some odd years. They've been here.
Yeah,
I
conversing.
think we got to take advantage of that. I mean, that's so important. We got to. If you don't need to Google something if you got people that knows this stuff around you.
100%. Like for example,
man. All you got to do is fact check the information after they give it to you. If you don't believe it, but the source is incredible, and we don't use a lot. We're not utilizing our resources in that capacity. I think that's what I want to close at because in essence of time, this would be another show.
Look, show into show into show. I agree with you, Rudd. I mean, I think again, it goes back to valuable conversations, right? That are not being had anymore because we are so focused on head into phones and head into internets and things of that nature. And a lot of information. It's the social media highway, right? It's the internet highway. So, with that said, I think the valuable thing, Rudd, as you said, is having those very candid, open conversations with people who have been there, done that, understand it, learned it, what I'm saying, educated themselves in these areas, because that is a valuable asset for you when you're sitting in those rooms and having those conversations. Because to your point, you can't have everything on the radio sitting in an hour segment. You know what I'm saying? These conversations come outside the room. We going. Go ahead.
No, we can always have a road trip. But you know what? And I know we've got to get ready to close. I think the most pertinent part that I just walked away with, because we came in talking about, like I said, something that's tangible with the asset protection, but we're each other's assets.
Yeah,
because,
absolutely.
Where I took Rudd's conversation was that it's bigger than just one person. Now, for me as a kid, believe it or not, going to the library was a treat for me. I mean, I spent hours in the library, and I'm only bringing that up is because if you look at what's actually happening in real time, in no other time in our history, people are actively trying to ban
books,
content, whatever it is, but education. No book, unless it's, I'll say, detrimental to society, is arguably a bad book because there's a lesson learned in every single book.
Absolutely.
The other thing that you said, Rudd, was really powerful for me because having an 85-year-old parent that lived in North Carolina, she can tell me firsthand about what the civil rights movement was about, better than a book can articulate or anything else. The week before February 21st, 1965 at the Audubon Hotel, that's when Malcolm X got killed. They knew the climate that was going on because Minister Farrakhan was at Temple number 25 in North, and my uncle was there. So when we talk in real time, the climate there, I had people I could ask that were on the planet that knew that could articulate what was the conditions that created that. So I mean, that's a specific point in time, but I agree with you. If those of you that are out here listening, pull a person over. Man, it's all about service. And I submit to you, there are more people, I'll call them old heads out of respect, that are willing to share some knowledge to you that may give you, most importantly, the perspective you need to potentially change your mind.
There you go. And that's the final words of DJ Jersey and DJ Rudd, the most interesting DJ in the world. With that said, y'all, we are going to close it out. We got so much. This could be days of conversations. And as you all know, we don't have enough time on the segments to do this and do it justice the way we want. But we'll continue to have these conversations, so they're important. So with that said, this is your girl, Stephia, Lady K, DJ Rudd, DJ Jersey. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us, people.
Sistership Sunday, every Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here, Gynesis Radio. See y'all next Sunday. Peace.